Chosen One, your life has become a living testimony that defies human logic because people are shocked by your protection and they have many questions about you, specifically regarding how you continue to thrive while others would have folded under the same pressure. You have walked through fires that were meant to destroy you and emerged glowing, creating a gap between the world's expectations and your actual reality that drives onlookers absolutely insane. Oud. Every chosen one has a defining moment, and it is never the polished version that gets told later. It is the raw one, your one. There was a point in your life, and you know exactly which one, where every visible indicator said it was over. The resources had dried up, the people you counted on had quietly disappeared, the direction you were heading got shut down hard. The people watching your situation exchanged glances that said everything, that is finished. Yumdathop, they started counting down to the end of your chapter. What they could not see, what they had no way of knowing, was that something was already moving on your behalf in the invisible space. It was not scrambling in response to the crisis, it was not reacting in a panic, it was already ahead of the situation, already rearranging the pieces of a chapter that nobody watching had been given clearance to read. While observers were mentally composing the conclusion of your season, the force behind your life was building, quietly, precisely, with zero panic, the exact bridge you were about to need. Time passed, and then something shifted. It was not dramatic, and it did not come with an announcement. A door opened, a conversation changed the trajectory, a resource appeared with no logical explanation for its timing, a circumstance flipped in a direction nobody had factored into the equation, and suddenly the people who had been confident about your ending were squinting at what looked unmistakably like a beginning. The discomfort on their faces in that moment was not grief for you, it was the first crack in their certainty that they understood how your life worked. That crack matters, because once someone has to revise their prediction about you even once, they begin watching you differently. The more closely they watch, the more evidence collects, and the more evidence collects, the deeper their unease goes. That moment was not just a turning point for you, it was the beginning of a reckoning for everyone who thought they had your outcome mapped out. Wid. After that first crack appeared, the people watching told themselves it was a fluke. That is the natural response. One inexplicable outcome does not require dismantling an entire worldview. One unusual survival can be filed under luck and left there. You got fortunate once, it happens, and that is not enough to force a revision of the framework. But then it happened again. The situation was different. The set of people aligned against you was different. The pressure was perfectly calibrated and perfectly positioned, and the result was exactly the same. Something intervened right before impact. The plan came apart. The pieces that had been carefully locked together collapsed, and you moved forward, untouched, in a direction nobody had anticipated and nobody could explain. Quietly and privately, a mental catalogue began forming in the minds of those watching. The deal collapsed for the person who was positioned to shut you down. The alliance assembled specifically against you, fractured over something completely unrelated to you. The damaging information that was supposed to surface never did. The resource appeared with no traceable origin at the precise moment it was needed. The opening materialized exactly when every other option had closed. One entry after another filled that private catalogue, and with each new entry, the word coincidence became harder and harder to defend. Here is what a consistent, undeniable pattern does to someone who has been operating from the wrong framework. It does not just challenge their conclusion about your outcome, it challenges their entire methodology for reaching conclusions. If their logic has been repeatedly and consistently wrong about you, then what else has that same logic gotten wrong? Your survival was not only your deliverance, It was an epistemological earthquake for everyone who believed they had life figured out well enough to predict yours. The word coincidence quietly retired from the conversation. A replacement had not arrived yet, but it was coming, and when it did, it would change everything about how people held your name. After the pattern became undeniable, a specific group stopped trying to explain it away and started trying to defeat it. If general approaches kept collapsing, the reasoning went, then what was needed was something more targeted and more personal, something engineered around your specific vulnerabilities, your specific relationships, your specific pressure points. Not a broad sweep, but a precise and surgical effort designed to slip through whatever had been deflecting everything else. Something personal enough, timed carefully enough to finally land on you. With real investment went into this effort. Real relationships were recruited. Real resources were deployed, and when the plan was laid out in full, it looked airtight. Every previous failure had been studied and accounted for. Every deflection had been factored in. This was the refined, comprehensive version, and the people who built it were convinced it was going to work. If these words stirred your consciousness, hype this video to help more chosen ones awaken to this. Odonote, you felt it. There is no need to pretend otherwise. That season where pressure arrived from every direction simultaneously, where the people you thought were safe turned out to be positioned against you, where options narrowed one by one, you recognized that something had been deliberately engineered around you. The closing in was real, and then the trap collapsed. Nobazaton tof medstaptakwatstolik. O holf pinkainek. Nobazaton collapsed because you had a cleverer strategy or more powerful connections. It collapsed because the force covering your life does not have a ceiling that sophistication can reach over. The same thing that deflected every clumsy early attempt deflected this precise, resourced, comprehensive effort with the same ease as though the increased sophistication had never been a serious variable. Nopazatond the bought, Odin the silence after that collapse was not frustration. It was a different and older kind of fear. It was the fear that arrives when someone collides with something they cannot explain, cannot match, and can no longer pretend does not exist. The word they had been avoiding finally arrived in their private understanding. Whatever is operating around this person is not natural, it is not neutral, and it is not going to stop. Vov. That recognition changed everything that came next. Something specific began happening in the spaces you were not present in. People who did not particularly like each other, who had different grievances and came from different positions, started comparing accounts of you, not to celebrate you, but to make sense of you. When one person has an experience they cannot explain, they hold it privately, but when multiple people, arriving from completely different angles, keep reaching the same inexplicable conclusion about the same individual, a quiet consensus forms. You were the subject of those conversations. The conclusion assembling itself across all of them was this: something unusual is operating around this person's life that none of us can access or account for. The accounts traded in those conversations traveled outward. They traveled as hesitation among people who had been planning to oppose you and suddenly found reasons to stay neutral. They traveled as alliances that were being quietly constructed against you, mysteriously never solidifying. The conversation you were not invited to became a layer of protection you never had to ask for. You've probably noticed a lot of Chosen One channels on YouTube have stopped publishing, videos pulled, voices silenced. The mainstream media is cracking down on us, but we will not give up our voice. That's exactly why I'm putting you on to something real, Destiny Engine. I built this because I was done watching Chosen Ones get dragged through betrayal, isolation and attacks, while their enemies strutted around unchecked. I want to help you accelerate the speed of your divine justice and step fully into your purpose. And the beauty of it, you don't even have to lift a finger. Destiny Engine takes their downfall and flips it into your rise. Occamant, this isn't another meditation app. It's declassified consciousness technology, the same mind programming tools your enemies once used to install fear, competition and scarcity, re-engineered to restore your sovereignty and align you with the cooperative, upgraded operating framework. It generates personalized sequences mapped to your divine purpose. The hardest thing you'll do is put on headphones, press play and watch your enemies keep digging their own grave. Join Destiny Engine to support your favorite channels and use it for your own rise. It's a 360 win. Start your Destiny Engine for $7 today and turn everything they did to break you into fuel for your rise. Link in the description. This is one of the most specific ways your covering works that rarely gets discussed openly. It does not operate only in the visible confrontations. It operates earlier in the planning stages of attacks that never reach the execution phase, because the confidence of the people involved quietly unravels before they ever move. You walk through each period, largely unaware of the volume of things that positioned themselves against you and turned around without completing their approach. They did not turn around because the intent was absent. They turned around because the intent encountered something before it reached you. The people in those private conversations were doing a kind of accounting they had never signed up for. They were assembling evidence of something they did not yet have language to name. And the picture coming together across all of their separate experiences pointed at the same conclusion. You are chosen, you are covered, and the protection over your life is not distributed to the rest of them. Dundun Dontai. Fundun Dontain hero, dun rutul attectuometium midditritium, non trituadiek. The attacks were expected to leave damage, visible, lasting damage, the kind that slows a person down, marks their posture, and puts a doubt in their voice that was not there before, the kind of damage that serves as a warning to anyone watching. This is what happens when you get hit that hard. After enough sustained pressure and enough coordinated effort to break you, the expectation was that you would emerge smaller than you entered. 1. You came out elevated. You were not performing wellness or projecting a confidence you were quietly rebuilding under the surface. You were actually elevated, sharper in your thinking, clearer in your sense of direction. You carried yourself with the kind of authority that only belongs to someone who has walked through the fire and discovered, not theoretically, but in lived experience, that the fire does not have the final word. Every betrayal became a revelation about who was genuinely aligned with your path and who had been performing alignment while waiting for the right moment to redirect their position. Every loss removed something that was never supposed to accompany you into the next phase anyway. The suffering was real, and there is no need to romanticize it. But the output of that suffering was something nobody observing from the outside had the framework to interpret correctly. Here is the part that broke their sense of control permanently. The effort poured into your destruction became the raw material of your construction. The resources invested in your downfall became the tuition for your next level. The relationships recruited against you became the revelation that clarified your actual alliances. The architects of your opposition accidentally built the very elevation they had positioned themselves to prevent, and they did not realize it until you were already standing at the height they had tried to block. That specific reversal is not something human strategy produces on its own. That is something higher. Pain transmuted into promotion, opposition transmuted into advancement, and the people who generated the pain became, without intending to, the architects of the outcome they had most worked against. By the time the evidence had accumulated to this point, the word luck had become genuinely impossible to sustain. Luck is random. Luck does not produce consistent patterns across multiple situations involving different people with different resources and different approaches. Luck does not intercept precisely timed, carefully resourced efforts. Luck does not flip attacks into promotions with the kind of consistent accuracy that had been on display across your life. Luck runs dry. Lucky periods end. Lucky outcomes do not carry this level of direction and intentionality. Accepting that what covered your life was not luck meant accepting something that created real discomfort for the people watching. Because if your protection was not random, then it was chosen. If it was not coincidence, then it was intentional. And if it was intentional, then there was a higher authority operating in your situation that had specifically designated you as someone to protect and move forward, regardless of what was assembled against you. That acknowledgement carries a cost for people who have built their lives on the belief that they control their outcomes, because if a higher power chose to cover you, that same power was not extending the same coverage to everyone watching. Sitting with that reality does two things simultaneously. It humbles in a way that was never consented to, and it makes every future move against you feel like something they are not equipped to survive. This is the pivot point of the entire arc you have been living. The emotional temperature around your name shifted from frustration to something older and more primal. It shifted from trying to defeat you to calculating the cost of attempting it. It shifted from treating your protection as a problem to be overcome to recognizing it as a boundary that carries real consequences for the ones who cross it. People will not say any of this to you directly. But in the honest, unguarded moments when your name surfaces among them, someone always says what the rest of the group has been privately thinking. There is something on that person's life, and pushing against it has a known and consistent cost. Will people that taftrigio timant pordek? Will people that pordek? Will people that tostran from we trio tauth? Will people that come to it thou forgi? To welcome to spound holes petvum, top witchuit, pachiking poredzon, pulbunkth popio, end of finalers, tum bunk to maudik, pul people the quantubon, and of the tum tel tot the bungri anja topio pija top bunk topio. Given the sustained and resourced campaign specifically designed to damage how others perceive you, given the accounts that were circulated, the half-truths armed with just enough detail to sound credible, the full fabrications dressed in the language of concern, your reputation was targeted with serious and deliberate intent. There were moments when you did not even have the opportunity to respond before the correction arrived on its own. The truth surfaced without your prompting. People who anchored their credibility to the constructed version of you found themselves contradicted by evidence they had not anticipated. Over time, the attack on your name became an inadvertent advertisement for your integrity. When something untrue is spoken about a person who is genuinely covered, the lie does not maintain the shelf life it would hold against someone else. It expires, often publicly, and often in ways that reflect more poorly on the source than on you. Look at who still speaks about you with respect. Now consider who built an identity around the narrative of your supposed collapse. The divergence between those two groups and where each currently stands is not accidental. The people who remained honest about who you are have stayed stable or moved forward. The people who invested in a fiction designed to replace the truth of you have generally found themselves in seasons of unraveling they did not predict. Your reputation carries a resilience your opponents were not accounting for. The covering over your life does not permit permanent branding by things that are not true about you. The mud that sticks on others loses its grip on you. The longer that pattern plays out, the more clearly it signals to anyone watching that something is actively maintaining the integrity of your name at a level no human campaign can compete with. In most situations, a delay exists between the harmful action and the consequence. That delay is what people count on. When someone does something damaging, they trust that the gap between the action and the accountability will be wide enough to regroup, spin a different narrative, and reposition themselves before the truth catches up. That gap is what makes harmful behavior feel manageable to the people engaging in it. It creates the illusion that consequences are distant enough to navigate around when, with you, that gap did not exist. When someone moved against you, the blowback arrived sharply and publicly, with a precision that removed all reasonable doubt about the connection between what was done and what followed. The lie told about you did not wait a season to be exposed. The trap constructed around your circumstances collapsed quickly enough that the person who built it was left more damaged by the failed attempt than they would have been by never engaging at all. The alliance formed with the specific purpose of limiting you fell apart in ways visible enough to register with everyone watching. The speed of those outcomes delivered a specific message that no one watching your life needed to decode. You are actively protected. The protection responds, and it does not operate on a timeline that gives wrongdoers space to reposition before accountability arrives. That awareness changed the calculation for everyone who had been operating from a sense of impunity around you. The strategy of moving against someone and then managing the aftermath assumes there is an aftermath window. There was no window with you. There was the action, and almost immediately the consequence. Once that became the established pattern, the boldness that had once characterized the opposition became something measurably quieter and considerably more cautious. Of all the specific things that unsettled the people watching your life, this one operated at the deepest level. When the pressure mounted, when the coordinated noise escalated, when everything in your situation looked like it was approaching a point of no return, the expected human response is visible, unraveling. Most people, in the situations you navigated, would have looked like someone being consumed by what was coming at them. They would have scrambled, grasped at anything stable, and matched the energy of the crisis with the kind of distress that confirms to everyone watching that the threat is landing. You were not frozen. You were not in denial. You were not performing a calm. You were secretly reconstructing under the surface. You were genuinely, rootedly, unshakably still. You moved with deliberate pace. You spoke from a place of settled certainty. You carried yourself with the posture of someone who was not rattled by the outcome because they already held a truth about how it resolved. That stillness did more damage to the confidence of your opposition than any direct confrontation would have. Composure in the middle of escalating pressure only comes from one of two places: not understanding the gravity of what is happening, or carrying a certainty that goes deeper than circumstances. You clearly understood the gravity, which left only the second explanation. You had access to something they did not, a settled knowing about the covering over your life that made genuine fear functionally unavailable to you in those moments. To you, your peace became its own form of testimony. Without a single word about what you carried, your posture announced it. Every time you entered a situation where people expected to find you rattled and found you instead settled and unhurried, the evidence of your protection grew louder. The conclusion forming in the minds of people who had watched long enough was unavoidable. You are not sustained by whether circumstances cooperate, and the source of your stability is not affected by what anyone does. That conclusion is far more destabilizing to opposition than any direct retaliation would ever be. People arrived at their confrontations with you carrying confidence. They had assessed the situation, identified the leverage, and built what they believed was a decisive advantage. The anticipated outcome was clear in their minds. You reduced, them elevated. Time revealed a different result entirely. Instead of celebrating, they found themselves managing losses they had not brought into the situation. Their credibility quietly eroded. Relationships fractured in ways that had nothing obvious to do with the confrontation itself. Opportunities that had been in motion before the encounter somehow dried up after it. Stability in areas of their life that had no visible connection to what they had done began shifting in uncomfortable directions, and through all of it you were moving forward, lighter and unburdened by the damage they had intended to leave on you, and did not scheme a countermove. You did not match their energy or construct a parallel attack. The act of targeting you set something in motion that did not require your management. The force that covers your life is not passive. It does not simply absorb impact. It redirects. What arrives at you with intent to damage does not disappear into nothing. It returns to its origin, carrying the full weight of what was intended, and that returning is not something you orchestrated. It is simply the operating architecture of a protection built for someone who was not designed to be stopped by anything assembled at the human level. The detail that dissolved their pride most completely was this: they could not point to anything you had done as the source of what landed on them. You had not retaliated in any traceable way, which meant the only available explanation was the one they least wanted to accept. The invisible force they had provoked by coming at you had responded, and the response was not proportional. It was conclusive. The season where your support thinned and the belonging felt distant looked from the outside like a strategic success for everyone who wanted you diminished. They understood what isolation does to most people: remove the external validation, thin out the community, eliminate the affirmation that most people run on. The result is predictable. The person begins to shrink, begins to doubt, and begins to compromise who they are in exchange for feeling included again. They go quiet. The isolation does its intended job. Podio. Everyone waiting for that version of you waited a long time. What they failed to account for was the supply line that has always sustained you. You carry a source of nourishment that does not root through other people's approval. You hold a connection to something that does not require a crowd to operate, does not depend on external validation to stay active, and does not thin out when relationships do. That supply line was not visible to the people watching from the outside. But when everything external was stripped away, it did not shrink. It expanded, because it finally had the space that all the noise had been filling. The silence that was designed to break you became the sharpest season of your development. Stripped of distraction, you heard the direction you were supposed to move in with a clarity that the presence of the crowd had been obscuring. The things you were called to do, the version of yourself you were being shaped into, the depth of certainty you now carry about your purpose, all of it came into focus during the very period that was supposed to silence you permanently. What? You did not come out of that isolation depleted. You emerged refined, and the version of you that walked out of that season carried something that visibly distinguished you from the person who entered it. The people who engineered the separation had handed you the exact conditions your development required. They gave you the quiet, and in the quiet you found out what you were actually made of. You have been in proximity to things that permanently claimed other people, and there is no need to pretend otherwise. You have moved through environments that consumed others without returning them. You have stood close to edges where a fall looked almost inevitable. You have felt the pull of patterns and cycles and invitations that did not have good outcomes on the other side of accepting them. By every reasonable measure, given the same proximity and the same human vulnerabilities, the same outcome should have been yours. And yet, every time, right before the point of no return, something moved on your behalf, and lied always dramatic. It was often quiet, a shift in circumstance at an uncanny moment, a clarity that cut through the fog with precision right when it was most needed, an interruption that arrived from a direction nobody was watching and redirected what had been building towards something irreversible. The pattern held. Darkness could get close to you, but it could not keep what it temporarily touched. What unnerved the people watching most was what you looked like after those encounters. They expected visible evidence of damage. They expected the kind of marking that other people carried from far less serious proximity to the same things. Instead, you emerged sharper, less susceptible, more discerning, and more difficult to deceive the next time the same invitation came dressed differently. Each close encounter with darkness functioned less as a wound and more as an education, and what each graduation left you with is something that people who never faced those pressures simply do not possess. Though darkness does not have permission to claim you permanently. That was decided at a level above the one where the darkness was operating. Every time it has attempted to hold on and failed, the evidence of that decision has accumulated. You are not someone who repeatedly escapes by luck. You are someone for whom a boundary was drawn that darkness has consistently found itself unable to cross. People thought bitterness toward you was a private and costless arrangement. But you'd say the reasoning made sense on the surface. Keep the resentment internal. Let the jealousy simmer quietly. Wish for the failure without vocalizing it. The envy stays hidden. Nobody knows, and the person holding it pays nothing for the position. It seemed like a clean and safe emotional investment. Progress that had been moving began stalling in ways they could not trace to any external cause. Opportunities that should have been available somehow were not. The ease that had characterized certain areas of their lives thinned out. No matter how many adjustments were made to external circumstances, the underlying drain persisted. The source of the drain was still active. The sustained investment of toxic intention directed at someone whose covering includes a built-in deflection mechanism was returning to the sender with compound weight. The bitterness did not land on you. It redirected. Every thought aimed at your failure returned to the thinker. Every scheme designed to limit your movement ended up limiting theirs instead. Every privately held wish for your collapse seeded exactly that outcome in their own situation. And you were not engineering any of this. It was not your awareness or your action that caused it. It was the automatic property of a covering that does not permit malicious intent to maintain its direction without consequences for the one generating it. Once this pattern became undeniable enough to recognize, the calculation around you shifted entirely. Holding envy toward someone covered at this level is not a neutral act. It is the most expensive emotional position available. The people who recognized that early enough to release the bitterness moved forward. The ones who held it longer found themselves progressively more depleted by the very thing they thought was costing them nothing. You do not need to be anyone's lesson. The protection handles the curriculum without your involvement. You do not the ritio good tobbering is not the whole revelation. It is the setup for the deeper one. You did not walk through everything you walked through simply so you could enjoy having survived it. The protection that absorbed every attack, redirected every weapon, and promoted you through every pressure was not just mercy. It was a declaration, written in the consistent pattern of your entire life, that what you are supposed to release into the world has not yet been fully expressed. The reason destruction could not hold you is because your purpose was not finished being built. Here is what separates chosen ones, who walk in the full expression of what they carry, from chosen ones who stall in the comfort of survival. The question of what the protection is protecting you for. Getting out is not the assignment. Getting out equipped, refined, tested, and ready. That is the assignment. The fires you came through were not random punishment. They were specific preparation. They built something in you that cannot be borrowed, faked, or transferred from anyone else's experience. You now carry a lived, tested, proved in real conditions knowing of what it means to be held when everything visible says you should have fallen, and that knowing makes you qualified for something that people who were never pressured that way simply cannot do. So, when the questions keep coming about how you are still standing, the complete answer is not only protection, it is purpose. You are still here because the reason you were placed in this world has not yet been fully expressed. The covering will remain active for as long as the assignment requires it, and the assignment is not finished. Walk in that clarity, not with arrogance, but with settled ownership of the weight you carry. Knowing that what is on your life is not only for you, is what will keep you moving forward when the comfort of having survived tempts you to coast. It is what will remind you, when your presence shifts the atmosphere wherever you go, that the shift is not for your entertainment. It is for the people who needed what only you, having been through exactly what you have been through, are positioned to bring. What you were not held through everything simply so you could exist. You were held so you could deliver. The questions that keep circling your name, the ones people cannot answer, the ones that surface every time someone tries to explain how you are still standing and comes up short, those questions carry a deeper answer underneath the obvious one. The obvious answer is the covering. The deeper answer is the purpose. The covering was assigned to protect. You do not have a category in their framework. That is the source of every conversation about you that never reaches a satisfying conclusion. Their predictions about your ceiling keep being contradicted by the ground you are currently standing on, which is already higher than their ceiling was supposed to allow. Every revised theory they build to account for you gets broken by the next outcome your life produces. And it will keep happening, because the covering is not seasonal, it is not circumstantial, and it is not tied to your performance or your perfection. It is tied to a decision that was made before you understood what it meant. Their confusion is not a problem for you to solve. It is a signal. The stare is not pressure on you. It is a response to the force operating through your life. And that force is so far outside the range of what is ordinarily accessible that the only honest response for anyone genuinely watching what you have walked through is to keep staring and keep asking questions they cannot answer. You do not have to explain it. You could not explain it completely, even if you tried, because the explanation operates at a level above this world's working vocabulary. What you can do is what you have always done. Keep walking. Keep showing up as exactly what you are. Keep moving through the pressures that are not permitted to stop you. Keep rising through the attempts to diminish you, and keep offering the overflow of what you carry to the people near you who are encountering something they cannot name but can feel the moment you arrive. Your silence answers questions people did not even know they were asking. Your posture preaches something your words have not yet been required to say. The settled, unhurried, unafraid way you move through this world communicates one irrefutable truth to everyone who has been watching long enough to understand the weight behind it. You know exactly what is behind you, and what is behind you is more than sufficient for anything ahead. That knowledge is yours. It cannot be copied, borrowed, or removed. The people who tried to imitate what you carry found it did not transfer. The ones who tried to dismantle it found it did not weaken. The ones who tried to wait it out found it did not expire. What is on your life was placed there by a decision above the level they are operating on, and it will remain active for as long as the purpose it is protecting requires it. The Notley, their silence is the testimony. Their inability to explain you is the loudest confirmation available. Their failed attempts are the most durable witnesses to what covers you. You do not just carry the protection, you have become it. Every environment that stabilizes when you arrive, every person who catches the overflow of your covering simply by being near you, every situation that finds its footing because you stepped into it, that is what it looks like when a chosen one walks in the full weight of what was placed on them. This is not arrogance, and it is not performance. It is the quiet, settled, immovable authority of someone who knows what is behind them and has stopped apologizing for it. Zeke, you are chosen, you are covered, you were built for this, and you are nowhere near finished.